Hello everyone, and welcome to another Shadowlands Shaman video. Today, we're doing laps around Oribos, and having a specific discussion about a certain important topic that a lot of Shaman players and community members in Mythic Plus are kind of going at arms about, essentially. And I wanted to cover when it's okay, or when it's time, to use Windspeakers Lava Resurgence Legendary over Echoes of the Great Sundering. Because, I don't know if some of you guys notice, but I use it sometimes on Fortified Weeks. And a lot of people get a little confused, or they scratch their heads as to why I'm doing that. And we're just going to have a discussion video about what my thought process is on the Legendary when bringing it into Mythic Plus, and like the decision making that goes behind it, as well as like some other points of discussion that I also want to put in there that kind of makes sense regarding the same issue or the same topic. So, points of discussions are going to be pros and cons of bringing an Elemental Shaman into the group outside of it excelling on its own. Obviously not having a Resto Shaman in there because class stacking is a little bit weird. You kind of don't want to class stack in Mythic Plus unless there's an abnormally good reason to do it, right? Depending on the dungeon, the group comp, the fixes that are out that week, that kind of gist, right? Your group compositions is another topic. Affixes that hurt us as Elemental Shaman, the meta, why it's hurting us in a specific playstyle. Specific dungeons that I think you should be using Windspeakers Legendary over Echoes of the Great Sundering, especially even not depending on your group comp. Like, let's just say you have all your bases covered already, or you need a certain amount of damage profile. There are certain dungeons where you probably still want to run Windspeakers over Echoes, no matter what. So we'll talk about that. Stats to use, like your character stats, your character stat sheets. What stats to use during the Windspeakers Lava Resurgence dungeons, and the mindset and overall gameplay. So those are the topics that we're going to be talking about. First off, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking, obviously. So I'm going to be also doing a lot of drinking liquids to keep my throat nice and moist. Alright, so let's talk about pros and cons about bringing Elemental Shaman into the group if you already don't have like a Resto Shaman, or if you don't have a Resto Shaman in the group. Say like you're running a Druid, a Resto Druid, a Holy Paladin, a Disc Priest, a Mistweaver Monk, right? Whatever your healer is. A Prop Paladin. We bring a lot of utility, actually. A lot of utility that is specific to certain dungeons, like Tremor Totem for Mists of Tyrannus Scythe, Decurse as well for Mists of Tyrannus Scythe, Decurse for a lot of abilities in the game. Like you can get Decursed in the other side, Sanguine Depths. It's very important in there because of the silence effects that happen, so you need a Decurse for that. Halls of Atonement, the second boss echelon. You pretty much need to have a Decurse for that. Plaguefall doesn't have a notable curse that I remember. Necrotic Wake doesn't have a notable curse that I remember. And Theater of Pain. You can dispel the tank on Kol Tharok. You can dispel the tank if Cast gets through. I believe it's a curse. But yeah. Also, Purge. You have an offensive Purge. You can purge so many magical buffs that the enemies put on themselves, like Magical Glow in Plaguefall, whatever. The mobs in Plaguefall do these little mushroom guys at the beginning. They do a little self buff. That can be spell stolen by mages. You can purge it as a shaman. There's a lot of purgeable abilities. First boss in Necrotic Wake, you can purge the healing Uwu shield. We have off healing in Healing Surge. Ancestral Guidance if we talent into it. Healing Stream Totem. Okay. We have off-tanking capabilities with Earth Elemental. We have an AoE stun. We have a knockback on certain affixes that's very strong, or just to tank, or to peel for the tank. We have an AoE slow. We have almost unprecedented single target damage when it comes to using the Windspeakers Legendary. And we are always on. Like, we're not cooldown reliant anymore, like we used to be. In BFA, we were super cooldown reliant when it came to like our damage. We had to have Blood of the Enemy up. We had to have Storm Elemental available, Stormkeeper, right? We're not as cooldown reliant when it comes to Windspeakers Lava Resurgence. We pretty much always have damage. You never have to save your cooldowns for something because you just always have damage. So you can always be using your cooldowns unless it's like revolving around Fire Elemental. You need it for a specific time. Plus we have Bloodlust. I know mages have that and hunters can use the pet, but like if you don't have a mage in your group, you can bring the shaman. You can also run a resto shaman. Cons for elemental shaman. The meta for tanks is very kite centered, right? Your tank jumps in, he uses all of his cooldowns, all of his defensives, or most of them, right? Because if it's a big pull, he wants to stay in there for as long as he can. And then he GTFOs, Vengeance Demon Hunters, talking about you. Pretty much the best tank right now because they're so mobile and they can do a crap ton of damage, survive the initial whop of doing a big pull, and then have the mobility to run away and kite mobs. So the whole meta around tanks right now is get in, get out without dying. And that's a lot of kiting. So if you think about the damage profile of Echoes of the Great Sundering, well, your mobs need to stay stationary within your Earthquake for you to deal damage. And unless you have a comp that revolves around keeping mobs stationary, like having a Balance Druid in there for trees, or a Marksman Hunter for Binding Shot, right? You're going to have a difficult time. And that's why it's so hard right now for elementals, shaman, like pug elemental shamans, to be able to do consistent and high damage in pugs. Pugging right now for an elemental shaman is bad. It's terrible, and I know that. I'm sure a lot of other people know that. All of you elemental shaman that can't even get into groups because there's like the meta is essentially against the class or the damage profile of the class, right? And that's another big reason why I've opted to using Windspeakers so much more often now in keys, because I fill a niche, or the damage profile itself with Windspeakers fills the niche of priority target, always on damage. Like, you're not cooldown reliant, you're very consistent, reliable damage, right? And priority target damage. Like, if something needs to die, you can do a lot of damage to that target outside of cooldowns. You're not reliant on your Mage Combust, your True Shot aura. So, let's talk just about Echoes of the Great Sundering and Windspeakers of the Great Windspeakers Lava Resurgence. Another con is Resto Shaman right now is one of the best healers to bring in Raid and to bring in Mythic Plus. And if you have a Resto Shaman, a lot of that utility that we talked about in the pros kind of overlaps. So the only thing that you would be really bringing is what your damage profile is, right? Because the Resto Shaman can do everything that you can do, except for maybe Primal Elementalist, right? Primal Elementalist is super niche because you can control the Earth Elemental. And it also acts as a second defensive, so there's that. So if Resto Shaman is in the meta for the healers to be brought in, or one of the best healers, you're kind of in a situation where you can still play with a Resto Shaman in your group. Of course you can. But I'm talking about pushing keys, optimal group composition, and kind of what the community foresees rather than reality. Because reality is you can go into a Mythic Plus group, anything 15 to an 18, and with any comp, you can time the dungeon. No matter what the overall is. Alright, you can time that dungeon as long as your group plays smarts and it plays to your group's composition's strengths. And I think knowing those strengths and knowing those weaknesses is a big part of the community that is lacking. The knowledge there is lacking. So this is one of the reasons why I'm talking about it. The meta is against us. Resto Shaman is one of the best healers, brings all of the utility that we bring, right? Short kick, melee kick, all that good stuff. All of the Tremor Totem, the Earthbind totem, the Cap totem, the Bloodlust, right? The off-tanking with Earth Elemental. Resto Shaman already brings all of that. And our damage profile is very stationary on the ground. If they buffed Earthquake, I think it'd be better. Because I think that Earthquake's base damage is too low for where the tank meta is, right? And I talked about this, like, the tank meta is to get in and get out and kite mobs. Well, Earthquake loses a lot of value there, and I think it would be a lot better, obviously, if it received a buff because of that factor alone. I don't think Blizzard would ever do that. It doesn't make sense, because in the situation where mobs are able to be consistently, or later on in the expansion, they would have to possibly nerf it back down. So, I don't think that would really make much sense for them to do it. Anyway, since we were talking about group compositions, there's Outlier DPS. Moving into the next topic. Outlier DPS, mages, hunters, windwalker monks. Okay, boomkins. Inside of their cooldowns. Outlaw rogues, they can pretty much do it all as well, but they're target capped. So, the meta right now is big, bursty damage. And part of the reason why that is so strong is because of the way that the tank meta is structured as well. The tanks have to get in and get out and kite mobs, right? So if all of your damage on your DPS is upfront damage, very bursty, high AoE burst, all of that kite time afterwards is lower. The amount of time that you're kiting after that initial part of that pull is a lot lower, because all of your damage was up front. You pretty much dealt with the majority of the health pools on the pack, and you're kind of just finishing things off as the tank is kiting. So that's the idea behind that bursty meta. So fire mages, obviously, with their combustion, their flame strike spams, the flame patch being really, really strong. Of course, flame patch suffers from the same issues that earthquake does. If targets are moved out of it, it severely hurts it. Ellie Shaman's first, though, because we had that trouble first. I don't want to hear mages crying in the comment section. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's just like, yeah, man, like, we've known for years as Elemental Shaman what that feels like, because tanks just don't stand still ever. So I get it. Marksman Hunters, Wild Spirits, does so much damage, and it's on a fairly short cooldown for what it does. On top of their trick shots, their trick shot combos, their true shot auras, right? They have so much upfront burst damage. They're exceptionally strong in the group, especially because of the amount of utility that they bring. Binding shot to help tanks kite, right? Feign death, feign dispel, trank shot for enrages and purges, right? Long kit, but it's a ranged kick, so it's pretty good. And they can bring bloodlust if they really need to. Sorry, I got a tear in my eye. I was just thinking about how cucked we are as Elemental Shaman. Boomkins, they have so much damage inside of their cooldowns. Their Convoke, their Celestial Alignment. Yeah, they're big cooldowns. Anyway, outside of that, though, it's like they have to ramp a lot, but they also have a lot of similar playstyles to Elemental because of pooling Astral Power. You can do that before the key as a balanced druid, right? You can have that option available for you. You can pool your Astral Power as mobs are dying and save it for the next pull, so that you can start off the next pull with a full Starfall and ready to go, and then just put out your dots and you're good. So Boomkins are also exceptionally good with their utility. They bring trees for tanks, which is so strong, and if you're not running Force of Nature as a balanced druid, you are utterly trolling in keys. You are utterly trolling. They also bring the battle res into the group, because ideally you'll have a Resto Shaman or a Holy Paladin as your healer, because they're so good at healing right now for both in dungeons and in raids, and in PvP. So like those top tier healers. So you kind of are missing the battle res on the healer spot, right? Usually that's where it was last season. Resto Druids were kind of like kings in Mythic Plus because of the way that they could just hot everybody up, do their healing, and then go back to DPSing. That was very, very good. It's no longer kind of like that. It's more of like well, you need throughput, right? Prideful is the seasonal affix that rewards healers that have a lot of throughput and consistent throughput. And so having that battle res on the, or still having that instant battle res available in the group rather than relying on engineering battle res is also very, very strong. You also have Typhoon, you have Ursul's Vortex, right? You have a lot of really good utility that you bring on top of your good damage profile. So that's Boomkins. Outlaw Windwalker Monks. It seems like Windwalker Monks are just always doing damage. They never are not doing damage. They always have something, or their base damage is super high. Their spread cleave, not spread cleave, I meant like their damage spread, so like their breakdown is surprisingly super even. They don't have like one damaging ability that is just like their outlier, right? It's all Spinning Crane Kick, Rising Sun Kick, Zuen, Tiger Lightning, like their Blackout, whatever it's called, Fist of Fury, right? It's all very balanced, I think. They have a very healthy, balanced damage breakdown. And because of that, they just always have damage available to do. And yes, their cooldowns are very strong. They have Touch of Death, which is extremely good for Prideful, because if you think about it, that last few percent of the Prideful is always the hardest, because the healer's running out of gas. Your DPS tried to hold their cooldowns for the next boss pull or the big pull that was coming next, whatever your Prideful timing is, right? So Touch of Death comes in super handy for Pridefuls and bosses and anything that actually needs to die from it. So really good, consistent damage, excellent class to bring in a Mythic Plus. Outlaw Rogues. No one ever said that Outlaw Rogue's utility wasn't good, or Rogue utility for the matter of fact wasn't good. They're going to be needed and solid throughout the entirety of all expansions in Mythic Plus just because of their toolkit. They are a stealth class. They have a mass cloak. They have huge control over mobs. They have consistent damage, 3 DPS specialization, so one of them is always going to be good. But the sheer amount of control that they can have in dungeons is so strong. And Outlaw Rogue being a top contender for single target sustained damage in dungeons is really good. Like, Outlaw Rogue does consistent prideful damage. It's super strong right now. No brainer to not have one in your group, depending on your group composition, right? So where does Elemental Shaman fall into this? Well, if you go into Echoes of the Great Sundering to fill a specific role, that's going to be for specific dungeons where even no matter what your group composition is, just because of the way that the dungeon plays out, an AoE build is going to be more valuable. So let's talk about those dungeons. The other side, Halls of Atonement, and Mists of Terranoside. All of these dungeons have big AoE pulls pretty consistently throughout the dungeon. Almost every wing here in the center ring for the other side has a big pull. You have these giant pulls that you can do. Usually you would use the urn right in the Hakar room. You can spread that up, right? You have this big pull here with the headless clients and the dog. That's a single target pull. You can skip these and bring these together. That's a decent 4-pack size. But when you get to Ardenweald, you have these massive giant pulls of the moths, the dark binders, like these Spriggans, the elder horns, like the deer, the blade beaks, right? Your tank is pulling massive packs, okay? And so an earthquake build, your Echoes of the Elements, you make up so much damage in this section alone if you run an AoE build in the dungeon than the entire rest of the dungeon. You make up so much damage here. And a lot of the time, you'll see Elemental Shamans kind of like pop off at this point in the dungeon, where like they were running a little bit low in the overall damage meters of the dungeon. But like once you get to here, because the packs live for so much longer, especially on fortified weeks, like you'll see Shamans start to pop off around this point in the dungeon because they can just bring so much consistent AoE damage. It's not as bursty, but it's consistent, right? And that's the thing about Elemental Shaman when it comes to what their damage profile looks like. Because we're not feeling that meta of upfront burst damage, we're pretty rampy. Because if you think about it, we have to go through 60 Maelstrom, Earthshock, into 60 generated Maelstrom again, into an Earthquake. So we're running through 2 bars of Maelstrom before we actually start doing big AoE. And on top of that, if the tank has to move the mobs, or like to kite, if you don't have control over the mobs while that Earthquake is out, you waste so much effort and time from that Earthquake because the mobs just leave. So like on weeks like Sanguine, like it was last week, it was very, very difficult to do a lot of damage in a dungeon like this because the tank has to kite so much on top of Sanguine constantly moving mobs out of Sanguine and all that stuff. It was a bad time, bad week to push as an Elemental Shaman. Let's talk about Halls of Atonement. It's pretty much a trash dungeon. You have this big lust pull at the beginning with 2 dogs, 2 dark blades, an obliterator, and another dark blade. Then you come over here, you do this other big pull, a 3-pack. This big pull, sometimes you bring in the groundskeepers into this pull. You come over here, groundskeepers. Sometimes you'll do these 4 together with the groundskeepers, and then these 2, or like all of these together right here. You come down here, you do this big pull. You have this big pull in the center here. You can do this 4-pack, right? This. And then if you go inside, you have a 5-pack here, another 4-pack there, and this giant room of AoE that's separated into 4 quadrants. Like, it's not pad to do big damage here because these souls need to die in order to kill the Inquisitor. So Halls of Atonement, it's a very trash-heavy dungeon. You can get away with running a priority target if it's like Tyrannical Week and you're really worried about like Echelon or Halkias. But like majority of the time, it's really high AoE trash center dungeon, right? You could argue like, oh, the shards of Halkias, like those are priority target damage. Yes, they are, for sure. But everything else in the dungeon is like, it's big pulls. The tank has to do a lot of kiting as well because of the dogs. And you want to get as much control over the mobs as possible when you're doing these damaging pulls. Now, let's talk about Mist of Tyrannus Scythe. Big pulls in here as well. You got the first... Wait, am I looking at this right? Yes. You have the first 5 here, this 4-pack. You skip this, do a 4 here. You have the 2. Tanks will pull. So, like, these guys die after the first boss. I don't even know why they're here. Wait, why are they here? That's weird count. These guys aren't supposed to be here. It's supposed to be 2 defenders. So, maybe I just have to update MTT. So, after these 2 mobs that are here, after the first boss dies, tanks will sometimes pull through the wall and grab another 4-pack into like this 2-pack. I think it's this one right here. So, you do a 6 pull here because you pull through the wall and you grab these 4 here. You have all of these 4-pack mobs, sometimes 5-pack mobs. After the second boss, then you come down here and it's like all of these little mobs inside of these bigger pulls. You have this padding swarm, these reavers here that usually get picked up within one of these pulls because sometimes you go left most of the time. You can do these big pulls together. Like, Mist of Tyrannus Scythe is a trash-heavy dungeon as well. On Tyrannical Week, it's very scary because the first boss can last forever. The second boss can be very, very scary within intermission times. But, like, these 3 dungeons that I'm talking about, pretty much you can always get away with running Echoes of the Great Sundering. It's understandable. Tyrannical Weeks, it's a different story. Like, Tyrannical Weeks, it's all about boss damage, especially with the scaling of Tyrannical, which I think Blizzard needs to fix because the health of the boss is fine, but the damage scaling is kind of out of control. Like, it's abnormally too much damage scaling from Tyrannical. So usually on Tyrannical Weeks, I will always run Windspeakers, Lava Resurgence, no matter the dungeon. Especially in dungeons where like you kind of have to meet a damage check on some of these bosses. Like Tredova can last forever as well on Tyrannical, even if you have Prideful and less going into that boss. So, on Fortified weeks, pretty much you can always use Echoes of the Great Sundering on those three dungeons. But on Fortified weeks, I think there's also points of contention in other dungeons that I didn't mention, that Windspeakers becomes very valuable depending on your group composition. So, if you're already running a Fire Mage and a Marksman Hunter in your group, and like you're the third DPS, you're the Shaman, you don't need to bring more AoE. You don't, because the Fire Mage and the Marksman Hunter are just going to blow crap up, and because of the way that your damage profile is very rampy as an Elemental Shaman, if you're running Echoes of the Great Sundering, because of how rampy it is, you have to go through 60 resource and then into another 60 before you start doing damage, right? There's several GCDs before you actually get your damage out. Whereas for those classes, it's quite instant. You can fill the niche of priority target damage with Windspeakers in dungeons like Plaguefall, Sanguine Depths, Spires of Ascension, Necrotic Wake, Theater of Pain. Let's talk about why I think these dungeons is better for you to consider depending on your group composition. Obviously, if you're running an Outlaw Rogue and like an Enhanced Shaman in your group, why would you be stacking Shamans? An Outlaw Rogue, like a DK, that like can do good AoE, but like they're not the best at AoE, right? So like you kind of want to then run a more balanced composition if you're running classes like that. So maybe you can introduce more AoE into your build rather than going into your Windspeakers. So it depends on the comp. But if you have classes already in your group that are just going to be doing stupid amounts of AoE, consider not going into Echoes to fill the niche, depending on the dungeon. Obviously, like I said, Miss Eterna Scythe, Halls of Atonement, the other side, like it's totally respectable for you to run an AoE build alongside those outlier classes because of the way that the dungeon pulls go. But in dungeons like Plaguefall, where a lot of your trash is actually just getting pretty much it's clearing itself. Plague Borers are used extensively in this dungeon to clear the trash for you. You don't really need AoE. There's this giant pull at the beginning, but like hunters and mages are just gonna run through that anyway. This decaying flesh giant has way more health than the other fungalmancer, like the fungi people. That's a priority target. Also, its creepy crawler's cast needs to get interrupted, so having the short range kick is nice. Like 3 target pull here, 3 target pull here. You could skip this and go into this 4-pack instead, right? This pack is usually going to die from Plague Borers. This pack is going to die from Plague Borers. You have a 3 target pull here, right? You could go this way, but normally you don't go there. You would do that alone. You would do like these 5 together, these 3. You could shroud skip this. You can pull these into the tentacle, and this guy summons Plague Borers as well. So you have this canister, but you also have the Plague Borers that this guy summons, and you can kill these tentacles with them, as well as like these 2 slime claws. Come down to this room. 3 target pull, 3 target pull, 2 target pull. There's this 5 target pull here with a priority target. Giant decaying flesh. You have some pulls here where it's like 4 or more targets. This is usually a 1 target pull. But the sniper does a lot of damage. Needs to be focused down. The ambusher needs to be focused down. Again, here, sniper and ambusher needs to be focused down. And then you have the boss fight. Down here, it's a 2 target pull. And then here comes the AoE. Okay? A thought process that I think also needs to be taken into account is a pull, a combat encounter with a group of mobs will last as long as the last survivor of that pull. So if you're consistently doing AoE cleave, spread cleave, even cleave, and there is a higher health mob just by having like a higher HP pool in the pull, the pull is always going to last as long as that one survives, right? So if your job then is to be a priority target damage dealer, you can still do respectable AoE because of Stormkeeper and Earthquakes if you need to, right? But because you have spread flame shocks, lava bursts constantly proccing, you can use Primordial Wave to do some good AoE damage as well by spreading your flame shocks. You still have the capabilities of doing like 15k burst AoE pretty respectably with your cooldowns and timing things properly. But in dungeons where there is a lot of priority target mobs and not a whole lot of big pulls, it's a different story. Okay, so let's talk about Sanguine Depths. That's a big pull right here. You can do these three alone, this one alone, or you can pull these three together. That's a 5 target, but these two are very low health. They'll die very quickly. And then these three, it's a 3 target pull. Same situation in here. You have like 3 targets, 4 targets that have higher health than the other smaller ticks. Right? And then you have the boss. This boss trucks. It's a damage check, essentially. Its enrage would be if your healer just runs out of juice because of how much group damage is happening. And then you have small mob pulls that are not going to live very long. You have oppressors. Again, you're a shaman, so you have short kick and you have curse dispel for these oppressors. You have these acolytes that have low health and the oppressor, a single target mob. 3 target pull, 3 target pull. There's 2 oppressors in here and then a bunch of low health target mobs. Those are going to die quickly. 3 target pull. You could skip this mini boss here. These guys, actually, the grubbies, they have quite a decent amount of HP. But things start to become more priority target after the first boss. 3 target pull, you could make it into a 6, but the warden needs to die. Again, 3 target pull could make it a 4. All of these 3 targets, these 4 target pulls, it's not, I know I'm saying that a lot, that those words together. It doesn't benefit earthquake damage that much with Windspeakers or with Echoes of the Great Sundering, because the amount of targets that you're facing reduces the amount of maelstrom that you're generating, because Chain Lightning caps out at 5, right? So you're not generating enough maelstrom to consistently get out empowered earthquakes. That's a hindering factor to your damage output. So the amount of mobs that you're able to pull in this dungeon is usually quite low. And outside of those moments, the mobs do not have a lot of health. Very small health pool mobs in the acolytes, the sprites that we showed, the cadets, right? The gauntlet, you need to focus down general call. Like, controlling these mobs is one thing, but padding your AoE and not pushing call further into the gauntlet is trolling. So in my opinion, I mean, you can get away with Echoes of the Great Sundering in this dungeon because obviously there's a lot of mobs in some of these parts of the dungeons that need to die. But call is the priority in the gauntlet. And this is a huge part in the dungeon where it can make or break your time on the key. So in my opinion, there's a time and a place to run Windspeakers Lava Resurgence. And usually in Sanguine Depths, I will always run it no matter the group composition, unless it's like a fairly low key and I can get away with not carrying as much. Spires of Ascension. This is another one of those dungeons that have quite big pulls, so you could get away with actually running Echoes of the Great Sundering in here, because you have this giant pull at the beginning, like 7 mobs. Usually you lust that pull, right? You have this 5-pack pull here, these cats, and you come over here, there's these Ether Wings, a 4-pack, another 5-pack, these guys here. This is a big one too. But the thing about Spires of Ascension is that it has these squad leaders in a lot of these pulls, which the squad leaders have an aura, and I don't know if you guys know about this, but the aura reduces the amount of AoE damage that allies near the squad leader take. So less AoE damage. I believe it's like, what, 80%? I'd have to look at it, but it's quite a significant amount of reduced AoE damage. Whereas now you have to think of these squad leaders as a priority target that needs to die first. So a lot of the time, groups will actually CC the groups that have the squad leader in them. They'll CC everything else, and then just pull the squad leader alone or with like another mob in the group. And well, now suddenly what looked like a bigger AoE pull is now 2 smaller ones. 75% reduced AoE damage. Thank you. We got a correction on that. Okay, and then you look at up here, you could do the Hellion. Okay, you have all these little mobs here that have no health. And then the kicker, the last kicker of the dungeon on a fortified week is the last 3 mobs in the dungeon. This is where you could easily wipe. Okay, and each of these mobs are pulled separately. Single target damage, priority damage. You need to save cooldowns. You need to usually lust on the final one before the boss. I've wiped here on several 19s and 18s because we just didn't have enough damage going into the final mini boss. And that's when I decided, okay, Spires of Ascension is a priority target dungeon. Even if the entire dungeon leads up to this point, this is the most important part of the dungeon that will make or break your key. Is the last 3 mobs. And if you don't have enough damage to beat the Soften Rage, which is just a stacking debuff that just does so much damage over time, you're not going to time the key, you're going to wipe. It's going to be a waste of time. The Spires of Ascension, in my opinion, is a priority target dungeon. Necrotic Wake. You have a lot of these big AoE pulls at the start of the dungeon, but these soldiers, they jump around so much. Okay, this is just the first factor. They jump around so much, the tank is kiting them, shit's going crazy, like... And the vanguards are actually very high priority. You can easily lock down a corpse harvester. Like, you can get every kick as a shaman on the drain or the harvest cast or whatever it is, the drain blood, whatever it's called. You can easily get every kick from the corpse harvester. But if you're putting all of your focus into the vanguard's usually the last one that's going to live in a pack like this, in these packs here. Not here, but because of its own shield that it provides itself, as well as its higher health pool. So it's 1.10, but the shield that it casts on itself makes it survive longer. So it becomes a priority target because you can easily lock down the corpse harvesters very, very easily. The necromancers, these are not AoE pulls. None of the health on these brittle bone mages, the warriors, the snipers, none of the health on those mobs matter. What matters is the necromancer. You kill that, everything else dies. Okay? The Marauders, they put a shield on themselves that lasts about 5 seconds. If you break the shield, it does a crap ton of damage to itself. So you need burst damage, you need priority target damage when those shields are up. Necromancer, again, usually you'll pull this to get to the golem back here if you have a Kyrian in your group. Another Martyr, 2 more Martyrs here that have those shields, okay? Not to mention all of the weapons. Here's another Necromancer that's usually pulled. All of the weapons that your group can use, the hammers, the animal orbs, the spears, those help clear the dungeon faster for you, whether you're using them on mobs or you're using them on boss fights. The dungeon plays itself up, because if you run a Kyrian, you have access to the golems. Everybody gets an AoE anima orb that starts pulsating around them and helps to damage, does a lot of damage, by the way, anybody within proximity of the player that has the anima buff on the Goliaths. There's 3 Goliaths total in the dungeon. 1 here before the first boss. 1 here, you can use it on the Necromancer, or usually Prideful is around this area. 1 over here, if you kill this Necromancer, you can use it. I'm going to go back down. You can use it to clear like these guys over here, and there's a Prideful that spawns around here. And then you have the boss, Emarth. This boss, even though the mobs need to die, usually you'll commit Lust here, you'll commit hopefully Prideful Timing, you'll usually use a spear, a Bastion Spear, one that you pick up within the dungeon, and a hammer too, usually. Because Emarth is a no-joke boss. Like, that guy needs to die quick. Alright, it can very easily get out of hand. And sometimes, if you run with a hunter or a priest in the group, they can shackle undead, the mages, or they can freezing trap, or a rogue can blind the mages, actually, and that the boss spawns. And you don't need to kill them once they're hard CC'd like that. Because when he does the final call, or whatever the boss's ability is, where he like kind of does an AoE swirly around all the mobs, and whatever ones are left alive will damage the group if the cast gets off. So if some of the targets or some of the mobs, usually you'll CC the mages, if those mages are hard CC'd with either the Shackle Undead, the Trap, the Blind, they will not explode on the raid group. So you can just hard CC them, ignore them, right? Pull everything else together and kind of AoE them down, and then focus back on single targeting Emarth. He's a very high priority target. We get up into the Stitch work room. We have priority target right here, Kyrian Stitchwork. Priority target, Kyrian Stitchwork. We have Rot Spew, which is a priority target. We have Gorgrind, which is a priority target. We have a Creation, Loyal Creation. That's a priority target. Okay? Like, also, the Flesh Crafters use an axe. They have this Throw Cleaver spell that if you aim it towards one of the enemy units as well, it will damage the other enemy unit. So this room is full of priority target mobs. You have the Assistants, which are, they come out together. They're only 2 targets. And all of these priority target mobs need to die before the other ones. You have a Collector, you can lock that down. You have a short kick, right? You can get those Gore Spews and the Drain, the Harvest, whatever the cast. Okay? And then you have the boss. You hook the boss, you'll usually use, sometimes you'll use Bloodlust here, you'll have Pride Timing, you'll have cooldowns, right? You want to usually 2-phase this boss. In a good group, you'll 2-phase this boss with 3 total hooks on the boss. That's a single target fight. That's a priority target fight. And then above is just a last boss with this guy. This is the last boss. He's a single target fight. Okay, so in my opinion, Necrotic Wake is a priority target dungeon. You can get away with the first zone obviously being an AoE center dungeon, but there are priority target mobs in here, and the soldiers and Blightbags, they jump around constantly and are going to be moved out of your Earthquake. I think I'm making a pretty valid point here. Theater of Pain. This one is a mixture, because you can make an argument for both. For sure, you can make an argument for both. Unfortunately, the Raging Bloodhorn needs to freaking die first, and then this is a 3-target pull. Sometimes you will pull this Raging Bloodhorn into the first boss and shroud past these 3, depending on your route. If you have a rogue in the group, right? You have a multi-target fight. You can say that, oh, I can use Earthquake on all 3 mobs. Or I can use Earthquake on all 3 targets. Like, they're stacked, right? They're not always stacked. And Desia needs to die first. Like, she needs to die first. She has a Fixate, which if you do not have a Soothe in your group, can become very freaking scary and one-shot any player in your group. So if you don't have a Trank Shot or a Soothe in your group, this is a very scary boss. She needs to be focused down almost immediately. Like, she is the priority target unless you bring the Raging Bloodhorn into the boss. Like, kill the Raging Bloodhorn first. But you usually only bring this into the boss if you have a Soothe in your group. So, moving downstairs. Chamber of Conquest. 3 target pull, single target mob, single target mob. The Ancient Captain. A lot of the time, depending on how high the key is, you will actually CC the Ancient Captain and bring these 4 mobs back into the previous room so that they're out of range of the captain. Or like you'll line of sight them on the stairs or whatever. You'll bring them back. Or you need to kill the captain like ASAP because he aura buffs everybody else and they do increased damage. So like you could Zerg it if you have enough healing and damage. You could Zerg it, but if you don't have enough control over the mobs and they're just getting out a crap ton of damage, it's a very scary pull. Single target boss, or single target mob here, single target boss. You have to kill the flag very quickly on this boss. Priority target right here. Priority target right here. Priority target right here. Single target mob. These are AoE pulls. By the way, you can focus kick the Sludge Blight, or the Blighted Sludge Spewer, and get every single one of its like AoE big things. But here's the thing about these mobs too, is that they jump around constantly. If your entire group is not stacked together, these guys will jump all over the place, and you'll lose a lot of damage value on your Earthquakes. Same with these ones here. Let's go downstairs. This is an AoE pack here, but the Diseased Horror can put a shield on himself that needs to be kicked, a lot like the Vanguard in Necrotic Wake. So that's a priority target mob. The Butcher's also a priority target mob, and it has one of these Blighted Sludge Spewers in here. Single target pull. Again, another one of these like semi-AoE pulls. I mean, it's not semi, like that's an AoE pull, but they can run and jump everywhere. So it's very... this is why I say like Theater of Pain is kind of like the halfway point where you can decide, okay, I'm going to run Echoes here because our group is actually good and they'll stack together during the Stitchwork wing and we can actually get some really good uptime on my Earthquakes. Like, that's up to the group composition, the players that are in there, how well they know the dungeon. Even if I am running Windspeakers, by the way, I do want to say this. I will still use Earthquake on trash packs like this, but I will spread Flame Shocks, right? I'll use Primordial Wave into Lava Burst, and then whatever Lava Surge procs that I get, I'll put into the priority target. So like I'm still using Chain Lightning and some Earthquakes towards the beginning, but as things die out and the amount of mobs reduce to fewer and fewer, then I will start to focus more on Earth Shocking and Lava Bursting for empowered empowered Lava Bursts. Two target pull here. This boss, single target. Let's move over to the rituals. This needs to be split up. And Earthquake is actually really good here because your knockdowns can interrupt the casts on the souls, on the Shackled Soul, which is really, really strong. So usually your tank will line of sight them back in this room. And then you can use your Stormkeeper, Chain Lightning, spam Earthquakes, put them down. Right? The more Earthquakes that you have on the ground, the higher chance that you're going to be interrupting the cast. So it's actually good that you might not be running Echoes here because you have half as many Earthquakes on the ground in this pull if you're running Echoes because you have to Earthshock before your Earthquake, right? So same thing here, the line of sight around here. This is a priority target here, the Portal Guardian. This is a 2-target pull. You could go this way. You want to usually go left though. The Portal Guardian is a priority target. You have a 2-target pull here. You usually will not go here. And then you have a 3-target pull into Prideful, usually into the boss. So a lot of smaller pulls, a lot of AoE pulls still can happen in this dungeon. But if your group is not prepared to simp for your Earthquake, essentially, you miss out on a lot of damage. Okay? So I hope that I've gotten my point across for these dungeons. That was a long spew. Affixes that hurt us. That's another talking point. And that's obviously any affixes that cause additional movement. Sanguine, Spiteful, Raging, Necrotic, right? The tank has to kite more on Necrotic week. It's just not a good meta for Ellie Shaman, honestly, when it comes to like them trying to get earthquakes on the ground and tanks not being able to stay in them or keep the mobs in them. Stats to go along with the Windspeakers, Lava Resurgence. It's kind of like you got to think about what would I bring in raid if I was running this, okay? So haste, versatility. Those are your two main secondary stats that you'll likely want to stack when it comes to running the Windspeakers build. It's like usually I will run this, but then in my dungeon groups I will take out Glyph of Assimilation for Sinful Gladiators. This gives me a little bit more crit, which helps if I need to put earthquakes down, but also helps with my earthquake, my earthshock damage, my lightning bolts empowered by Stormkeeper, right? So there's that. And then I have 24% versatility, 14% haste, which I want to get up a little bit more. I want to be around like 15, 16, 17%. And then I have a little bit of mastery from my rings, my helmet, my chest, right? So I have a little bit of mastery. Mastery is not wasted at all when it comes to Windspeakers Lava Resurgence. It's actually a really good stat for Windspeakers because more mastery means more Maelstrom generation, which means more Earth Shocks, which means more Lava Bursts, and Lava Bursts can Elemental Overload, and your main damaging component with Windspeakers is Lava Bursts, right? So if you're just getting more Lava Burst damage out of stacking Mastery or having more Mastery on your character, that's a good thing. Definitely simulate your character. Simulate your character. Sim your character. Use SimC, use raid bots to see what stats are kind of more beneficial for your single target, your priority target. You can do like 3 target pull mobs, spread cleave, simulations on raid bots, 2 to 3 target, and kind of that allows you to emulate what it would be like or what stats you would need for that type of pull. I pretty much will pair my Badge of Ferocity with my Stormkeeper when it comes to like using this trinket. Because it's a minute, I can use it always with Stormkeeper, and I never really don't have it. And then I also will run Inscrutable Quantum Device. Now the thing about this trinket is actually it's very, very strong with Windspeakers because you can roll versatility. If I roll versatility, I immediately shoot up to 39% versatility for a damn long time. Okay? That is a long time to have 39% versatility. That's a good amount of damage. So usually at the start of the fight, I will roll with using my Gladiator's Badge for my on-use. And then as my second on-use trinket comes off cooldown, I will use it. Hopefully, I'll get versatility. This will then push my consistent damage to prolong my burst, essentially. And it'll just stay high. And I can sustain like 13k damage for a good minute. It's amazing. Mindset and overall gameplay. That's the last thing I want to talk about. So, when it comes to what your job is in a dungeon, what niche you're filling, if you're playing Windspeakers, you are the single target Andy in the group. You do a crap ton of damage to Pridefuls. You don't really need to save your cooldowns for bosses. Like, you can use your cooldowns on Prideful and be like, yeah, I'm going to use my cooldowns on Prideful. I'll blow it up, right? Because I'm always going to have consistent damage no matter what. So you can be that guy in the group that does a lot more of the Prideful damage, a lot more of the priority target damage. You still want to spread your flame shocks, right? Make good use of Primordial Wave and multiple Lava Bursts at the same time. In a pack, like in an AoE pack, you can use Stormkeeper into Earthquakes, right? But if your Fire Elemental is available to use on that AoE pack, pretty much use Flame Shock on cooldown in anticipation for a Primordial Wave multi-Lava Burst cast. So your mindset is essentially, which target out of this pool needs to die? Okay, that's the one that I need to focus a little bit more attention on. Okay? You're pretty much in a similar mindset to raiding while you're in dungeons, except there's a lot more shit that's going on and a timer that you're running up against. So I hope that this video gave you guys a little bit more insight. It's a pretty long one. It's probably going to be cut down a little bit. We're going to add some edits into there, but it's a discussion video. Okay. It's around an hour. So I don't know how long we can cut this down. This was recorded live on twitch.tv/Barokoshama. So if you guys are a fan of the content that I'm putting out on YouTube, make sure you head on over there, drop a follow, say hi. I stream pretty much almost every day. Subscribe to the channel if you want to support my content. Like the video if you like it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to stay up to date on the content that I'm putting out, and ring the bell icon for those notifications. Okay. I'm also going to be leaving the link to my Patreon down below, so if you guys want to take a look at that, you're more than welcome to. My merch store, where I have Barokoshama t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, fucking Shaman hoodies, totemic mugs, and all that cutesy good stuff. It's good. Anyway, all that will be in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. And until next time, keep calm and Maelstrom on. Bye-bye.